Hey guys, Quantum here with another deck profile, this time bringing you a spicy Ruby Amethyst list. With the inherently bad matchup that Ruby Amethyst has against Emerald, I wanted to try to cook up a way where I think that this deck could possibly do a little bit better. At the time of me making this deck profile, I actually haven't tested it against Emerald. I have tested it against other meta matchups though, that being Steel Song and Ruby Sapphire. Those matches are probably already on the channel by the time this deck profile goes live because I do make these deck profiles available first for members for the first 24-48 hours, then I release them to the public. So if you wanted to support the channel a little bit more than just liking and commenting, you could subscribe to the YouTube channel for $2.99 a month, but you don't have to because, like I said, this stuff gets made public anyways. But let's go ahead and get into the deck list and talk about how the matches went. So this does play the standard, I guess you can call it now, the new standard one-drop package for Ruby Amethyst, which is 4 Chernobog Followers and 4 Magic Brooms. So these cards represent card draw as a one-drop, right? So, you know, Chernobog is a 2-1 body, which is the stronger of the two in my opinion, because this 2 strength could trade out into something with also having you the option of banishing it when it quests in order to draw you a card. So, you know, if this card is kind of stuck on the board and you don't want to quest with it because it's going to get challenged and outed, you're just like, well, I'll just quest and banish it and draw a card. Now, of course, it comes at the cost of board presence, but it is a way that you can, you know, sift through your deck and search for answers, hopefully. And the Magic Broom is essentially the same thing, just a reverse stat line, so it's a little bit weaker in a 1-2. But you can quest with it, play a character, and then banish it and draw a card as well. So again, losing board presence in order to get card draw. But it's nice to have one-drops that offer you a little bit more than just a vanilla, like 2-2 body or 1-3 body, right? In the 2-drop slot, I've gone back to the Cuscos, and I am playing Madam Mim Snake as well as Pinocchio. So you'll see why these Cuscos are back in the deck. But similar to, again, what we get with these 1-drops is it represents card draw. So more ways to sift through your deck. You can run it into something if you boost it up with Crab or anything else, and likely trade positively because you draw a card. Again, coming at the cost of board presence, but hopefully if you trade it out, it does end up outing something, like if you boost it with Crab and then, you know, you take out a threat and draw a card so it replaces itself. At the worst, sorry, it's also ink and or it's just a body you put on board to quest for 1, right? So Cusco still remains kind of relevant, but again, it's one of those cards that is understated, it's weak, right? When you look at what Magic Broom offers you, it's almost the same. You know, Cusco is technically a little bit better, that's why it costs 2, I guess. But again, the fact that you can like run this into something and draw the card, whereas Magic Broom, you know, same stat line, but you're not really going to run this into something other than like an X and 1 toughness character so that you can trade out with it. But you have to play a character to banish it to draw a card. So Cusco at 4, Mim Snake. Again, another card that makes you lose tempo, right? If you have a 1-drop, you're going to quest with the Chernobog, you're not going to banish it, you're going to play your Snake and bounce back the Chernobog. But then you have another 1-drop in hand, right? You can either ink this later on. This is kind of what made Ruby Amethyst tier 0 in Rise of the Floodborns format. You can either ink this or against the Emerald decks, right? Not having a wide board just means you don't play into like a big Grab Your Swords or something, but also gives you more cards in hand that you can discard for the Bucky, right? If they have Bucky and they're forcing you to discard every turn, you draw, you ink, you play a card, and if you're able to bounce back that card later after you quested with it, it just gives you more options to discard low impact cards to the Bucky. So that's kind of the, not thought process, but something that you can apply because, I mean, everyone plays snakes and foxes in Ruby Amethyst. And then the final character is the 2 Pinocchio. Again, just something to give you a little bit more of counterplay against some of the stronger decks that drop big ready threats that you need to out, because of course we're still playing Mauis, we're playing Crabs to boost up some other cards like Foxes that we can throw into those characters and get some advantage off of. And then one of my tech options back in the deck against Diablo is, and Flynn Rider Frenemy, is Teeth and Ambition. So you notice that there is no Flynn Rider Frenemy in this build. We put back in the Cuscos instead. But yep, this card being able to be sung with the Cusco and banish the Cusco to draw a card. Yes, you technically go, well, I guess you don't really go -1, right? Because the Teeth should take out a threat and then the Cusco replaces itself, but it does cost you board presence. You don't really lose tempo because you sing it. It is a song though, so you have to be careful, right? This might get ripped out of your hand with an Ursula Deceiver, but being a 2-cost song and inkable means that you can always ink it or, you know, play it very quickly before your opponent can Deceiver you if you are worried about that, hopefully. In the 3-drop slot, we are playing 2 Crab and 4 Foxes. Can't count today. So, you know, this package is pretty standard. Usually I play 3 Crabs, but I've cut this down and you'll see why, because we're playing another 3-drop card that is, in my opinion, pretty nice. But Crab is still very relevant on play, and when bounced, right, it does give you the +3, and that can come into handy quite a bit. You know, the bounce factor, replaying it, you know, because every time you bounce a Merlin card, it represents another cycle, right? So I play it, I get the +3. If I bounce it, I have it in hand that I can replay. So that represents 4 potential when it gets outed, if I can out it during my turn, boosts of +3. But usually when you bounce crab back, it's served its purpose and you can just use it as ink, or again, like discard for a Bucky if you don't need it anymore, if it served its purpose. So pretty standard stuff there. And then, in my opinion, like I keep saying, one of the best options that, or one of the best cards that Ruby got is Brawl. And the reason I say this, I know this is not a popular opinion, but when you think about the biggest threats in the format, Hiram, 1/6. Hard to out otherwise, right? Diablo, evasive, 2/2 body. Ursula, Deceiver of All, still remains a threat. Like, there's a lot of things that this card can out. Bell for the Sapphire Steel matchup. When they drop it, they dime it if they have a Cogsworth on board, right? This plays around all of that. So, still a lot of application for this card. It does a lot. It, you know, gives you a lot of counterplay against the aggro decks as well, like the evasive decks and stuff too. So still, in my opinion, a really good option. We need more ways to out-readied characters, right? So this is exactly what we needed. Unfortunately, in Ruby Sapphire, it is like even stronger because Ruby Sapphire is an insane deck. But against in Ruby Amethyst, you know, you still play 4. And then the spicy tech option, and the reason why we cut Crab down to 2 from 3 is Tuk Tuk. So this is a 3 cost, 2/3 body, which means it does come out technically the same time as Diablo if they don't shift it onto the 1-drop Diablo. And it does have evasive, so it can challenge into the Diablo, and at a 2/3 body, it does survive. Now, it does not have rush, so, you know, you have to play it, wait a turn, and, you know, if your opponent has an Exerted Diablo, then you run this into it. And this doesn't get let the Storm Raged on, right, because it'll only deal 2 damage to it, so it does survive. Similar to the Broom on Steel, right, the one that gets evasive during your turn, the 2/3 body. The difference is that's a 2-cost card, this is a 3-cost card. The extra effect that this gets, though, gives, is that when you play this character, you can move this and another character to a location. So if you already have like a Queen's Castle in play, and you have a couple of smaller characters on board, or even bigger characters, you drop this, you move both of those characters to the Queen's Castle. If your Queen's Castle can survive, well, you know, you're going to be drawing 2, 3, who knows how many, right? And that just gets you right back into the game no matter what matchup you are in. So this card, being able to gain tempo from that free move to a location is very nice. Also, it gives that character +2. Even if you don't have a location in play, if you play this, from what I understand, you can just target a character and give it +2. So similar to Crab giving +3, you know, this on bounce doesn't give anything when it leaves the field. But, you know, imagine if you were able to play like a Fox and move this, a Fox and this to, you know, Fox on the previous turn. Or even on the same turn because it has rush, right? If you have 6 ink, you can play both. But you play Fox and then you play this and you move both of them to a location for free, and then Fox gets, you know, +2, so it's a 6/3 body. It has rush, so it can rush into something. Absolutely insane. Or, you know, you play Fox on the previous turn or any other character, you play Tuk Tuk, and you move both of them to a location, and then maybe you follow up with like a Pinocchio to exert a character, and now your Fox has an instant target to rush down and out at a 6/3 body. Super, super strong, right? So Tuk Tuk, I think, is an underrated card right now. I do think it deserves to be explored more. And hopefully we do get some more powerful locations. The locations in Ursula's Return were definitely very underwhelming. And we've seen how strong locations are in this format. Like the Queen's Castle is one of the strongest cards in the format, undoubtedly, in my opinion. Like, it is insanely strong, and it's the only reason that Ruby Amethyst remains relevant in the meta, in my opinion. So just more ways to, like, get the utilization off the Queen's Castle is nice. You know, at worst, this is just ink. In certain scenarios, yes, it could be a dead card because you have nothing on board, you have no locations up, and you're just like, I have this in my hand. That's why we only run 2, not 3, not 4, because when it does go off, it can be pretty nice and set you up for a very strong position to close out the game. In the 4-drop slot, we continue to play 4 goats and 4 rabbits. You notice that I moved on from the 3-drop slot, and there's no friends on the other side, no Maleficent 3-drop. So yes, we are scaling back on some of that card draw to play some of these more techable options, which again, you can opt to maybe lower some of these ratios. Maybe you only want to play 3 rabbits and 3 goats and then play like 4 friends or something, right? So, you know, fix around the ratios. You can definitely do that because friends is definitely a very strong card, and you have a lot of options to use friends with, right? You have the crabs, the foxes, the goats, the rabbits, the tuk-tuks, in order to sing friends, as well as everything else that's on the upper end of this deck. But for me right now, I tested it without friends. I think I did miss it though. So I would probably try to test it with friends and without. But you can see, like, between all of the cards we have, you know, this represents card draw, the 1-drops represent card draw, the Kuzcos represent card draw. So you have a lot of ways to cycle through your deck, but really, you want to see the locations at some point when you can drop them. So that's kind of your goal. You're not really looking to stack your hand with other options, because your goal is to get the castle out and then get things into the castle as quickly as possible. So you need to see the castle in the first place, you need to be able to play it, and then you need to move things to it. Because if you're able to constantly out the opponent's board, or like manage their board state, and we've seen a lot of decks become slower in the format, right? I don't know if I'd say slower, but they're slowly building up boards. You're not really seeing like for example, Ruby Sapphire takes a while to get some characters on board, right? But when they do develop their characters, they're dropping big ones like Maui's and things like that. And Maui is a big problem, yes, for this deck in particular. But if you don't play against the Maui, and again, like I said, this is kind of configured for Emerald Steel or the Emerald matchups, those decks struggle a little bit more into the locations as well. And we know when these hit the field, these are very powerful against Sapphire decks as well, right? Like the Ruby Sapphire needs to see Maui as well as another character in order to instantly out this right away, right? And if you're able to slow them down at least a little bit, because they don't really play anything that's big and threatening before Maui. Like they have Hiram, they have Gramatala. So if they have like Gramatala and then they play Maui, that's a problem. But if they don't have that specific line, then the Queen's Castle is going to stick for a turn or two. Hopefully you can get some draws off of it, gain the lore, and it's very, very strong. So that's kind of the game plan of the deck. And then speaking of which, we're running 4 Queen's Castle, and then the tech option for the extra locations is 3 RLS Legacy. So you can kind of see what I've been going for in the later stages of the game when those Diablos do come down. So not necessarily on curve on turn 3. If you have an RLS Legacy up and you play a Tuk Tuk, your character and this Tuk Tuk move to the RLS for free, bypassing the 3 cost to move to the RLS, which means that, if you move something like, well, anything really, except for a Pinocchio. Well, no, actually, even a Pinocchio. If you have a dead Pinocchio on board and you move it to RLS with Tuk Tuk, this becomes a 3-1 body. You throw this into the Diablo because things here get evasive. So it makes your whole deck able to take out Diablo if you have an RLS up. And we know against Emerald, they'll have trouble outing this 8 toughness location. It is uninkable, which is unfortunate, but you can bypass this cost with the Tuk Tuk. It is a 2 lore generating 8 toughness beast, basically, that sits on board and just generates you a ton of lore. So even if you have no hand, as long as you're able to, hopefully get some stuff on the Queen's Castle, draw a few cards during your turn that, you can play out so it doesn't get discarded, these locations are going to passively gain you lore, and you're going to be able to hopefully deal with and or challenge the opponent's board so that they can't keep throwing things into your locations to out them. And then, your locations kind of mop up the game passively for you there. So we've seen how strong the Queen's Castle is. Sorry if this is kind of off center, guys, but that's kind of the goal of this deck, is utilizing the locations a little bit better, because if the Queen's Castle is strong, well, what else can we run that's also going to be strong, right? If we know this location is strong. Well, RLS also costs 4, and it's 1 extra toughness. It still gains you 2 lore. Yes, it's not as good because it doesn't draw you the cards, and it's not inkable, but the evasive ability is actually relevant given how popular Diablo is and how popular Emerald Steel is. So it is an interesting tech option for that reason. And then moving on from the 4-drop slot, we're back on the Jim Hawkins. With the 7 locations, I've opted for 3. You can cut this down to, again, 2 maybe, because you don't necessarily always need to see this on curve. But, again, you can cut this and maybe put in, like, the friends on the other side, for example. But yeah, 3 Jim Hawkins, just because I did want to test out how relevant it was to drop him and a location at the same time. But I think that he is a little underwhelming because with Ruby Amethyst having to play a little bit faster now, you're dumping your hand quite quickly, and or you just don't have a hand, right? So drawing this with no location is really bad. I mean, yes, it's just ink if that's the case, but the impact of playing him and a location isn't really like super strong unless you can execute it in a position where your opponent can't instantly challenge that location right away or out your character right away. Him being a 4/4 body is still pretty relevant, because he can't get Medusa right away. He needs to be ice block and then Medusa. He doesn't get brawled or anything like that into the Ruby Sapphire matchups, for example. So if your like Ruby Sapphire player doesn't have anything on board, and you might say like, okay, they might have a Maui or a Medusa in hand waiting, they need an ice block and drop the Medusa in order to out your Jim. And even if they do that, your Queen's Castle survives. If they drop a Maui, they throw Maui into it, it still survives, and then you're going to be able to draw 1 off of the castle, assuming you don't move anything else there. So it is pretty strong. And then, like I said, if you follow up with like a Tuk Tuk, and then you're just able to move more things to the castle, and it can survive another turn, that's basically a game-winning play, right? That's how strong Castle is. Gaining you like 4 lore, drawing you 2 to 3 cards extra, can be absolutely momentous for winning you that game. And then to round it out, it's pretty standard from here. We've got 4 Mauis and 3 Maui Medusas. Nothing really to explain here. Yes, the Maui Medusa comes online later, and it only hits 3 strength or less characters. So if you have a location up, you know, you're trying to out things that might challenge into the location, let's say, but only being able to hit 3 strength or less characters is a little underwhelming. Like, I think there was a match where I had to hit a Grammatala because they could have thrown that into my location and dropped a Maui the next turn, like I was saying. And it feels bad, right, to out a character that replaced itself with a Medusa. But it's what you have to do. I mean, you know, you feel good when you out a Hiram with it, even though Hiram replaced... Well, I guess Hiram goes 2 for 2, right? Because Hiram plus the item equals 2, draw 2. So, yeah, it is what it is. But, again, just further cards to kind of protect your locations. Maui also obviously does really well into challenging anything that could be a threat. And it is inkable as well. And then the final 3 cards, which I think you want to up to 4, is 3 Be Prepareds. This card, unfortunately, you know, being a song, being uninkable, it's clunky, and it gets ripped out of your hand with an Ursula Deceiver, right? So it's still a good card. It's still very powerful, but you definitely don't want to see this early in the game. You don't want to be sitting on this waiting to cast it. You want to draw this late in the game. So you want to mulligan, obviously, any copies you see. And this is maybe one of the reasons why you don't want to run excessive card draw right away until you start seeing your Queen's Castle, when you do want to start beefing up your hand after you've dropped this. Because after you drop this and your other locations, now you're like, now I need to see my board wiping. And if I draw into a Be Prepared here, it could be really, really strong, right? Assuming it doesn't get ripped out of my hand. So, yeah, not playing friends and drawing all those extra cards, drawing into bricks like these could, you know, kind of offset some of that. Yes, you do still play the lower package, but like lower package, like in the Chernobog followers, the Magic Brooms and the Cuscos. But yeah, we all know, like, if you have locations up and you Be Prepared to board, your locations sit there and it's like, yeah, they're going to survive for like a turn or 2 more. Now they're getting the extra lore. I can likely move stuff around to the locations following up. And unless you can out those locations right away on the following turn, like, they're going to put in some work in addition to that. So it's the only song in the deck aside from Teeth and Ambitions that you run. So, you know, Ursula Deceiver, you know, hopefully doesn't rip this out of your hand too early, you know, on 6 where you probably don't want to have it in your hand. But if you do have it in your hand early where it does get ripped out, it's really, really bad. And that's kind of the reason why Ruby Amethyst does suffer a little bit still, because the Be Prepared is really what this deck traditionally has relied on in order to stabilize game states. In set 2, it didn't really rely on Be Prepared because Ruby Amethyst was everywhere and everyone was kind of doing the same thing, and board states were not as developed as they would have been now by turn 7, because Ursula Deceiver has changed the face of that metagame, where you really do need to see Be Prepared in the Ruby Amethyst deck in order to properly stabilize yourself into other matchups now. So yeah, I would up this to 4 if I can, but that's a straight 60, and that is the deck profile. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hopefully I'll post some more if I can test it, maybe 1 or 2 matches against some Emerald decks and see how it fares that way. But yeah, let me know what you think. Thank you again for watching. Quantum is out.